What's up agents, Epic Slayers here. If you're watching this video, you're probably unsure whether you should purchase the Division 1 now or wait for the Division 2 to come out. Now I've been covering this game for 2.5 years and I think I've got a pretty good grasp on where the game is currently, where it was, and I should be able to answer the question for you. So if you enjoy this video, please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe for as much Division content as possible going into the Division 2 as well, and let's get into it. So as I mentioned, I've been playing this game for some time, I've put in a lot of hours, so part of me just wants to scream, yes, purchase the game, it's one of the best games ever, because that's how I feel. But I want to be as neutral and unbiased as I possibly can be, so I'm going to offer both reasons why you should be purchasing the Division 1 for the Division 2, and the reasons why you shouldn't. And hopefully that gives a neutral perspective of why whether you should be getting the game or not. So I'm going to start off with the reasons why you should be purchasing the Division 1 right now. And the first one is really important. It's called shields. Now they're effectively achievements that you need to achieve and obtain within the Division 1, and it will unlock vanity items for the Division 2. Now that's really important because most people who get to the end game of any game, Division 1, Destiny, Fortnite, whatever it might be, it basically becomes a fashion war when you've got every piece of gear in the game. You want to look the best. The amount of times I get comments about the jacket I'm wearing or the headphones around my neck or whatever, people want to get this stuff. And the best way to get exclusive items from the Division 1 in the Division 2 is by purchasing the Division 1 right now. And that way you can unlock these shields and get this gear in the Division 2. Now luckily, you don't have to worry about having to try and level up massively. As long as you grind to level 30, which is basically the campaign, a couple of side missions, then you will actually get a new cache. With update 1.8.2, there is a cache which you can open, and it gives you a lot of gear, it gives you a lot of currency, and that way you'll be ready to unlock those achievements straight away. So there isn't a massive grind in order to unlock those achievements. You will have to go through the story campaign, which, by the way, I will mention in another point. You will have to go through that campaign, but it's a pretty amazing campaign, at least in my opinion. So yeah, definitely worth getting the game right now to get those vanity items for the Division 2. If you're purchasing the Division 2 in March of 2019 and you're into lore, then it's probably worth buying the Division 1 in order to understand the lore that makes the Division 2, surely. Also, you'd want to get familiar with maybe the characters. It's likely that we're probably going to see similar characters from the Division 1 and the Division 2. It's probably likely we're going to see characters from the Division 1 in the Division 2 making an appearance, and it would make sense that you get into the lore, you understand what's going on, so that way in the Division 2 you kind of understand the entire story. Now, I'm not going to lie, the story in the Division 1 isn't epic, but it was different. And at least for me, I need to get into the lore myself, and I think for people who want to get the Division 2, surely you'd want to understand the story. That's what I think anyway. So best idea, get the Division 1, play the missions 1 to 30, and that way you'll understand the lore for the Division 2, and that way you can, it kind of becomes a continuous story for you guys, and it just makes the Division 2 story a lot better for you, and at least you'll understand where the game is going, and you'll appreciate the game more when it drops. If you're watching this video, you've either never played the game before, so you're interested in purchasing the Division 1 for the Division 2 because that's a game that interests you, or you have played it before and you're not playing it anymore, so you want to see whether it's worth coming back. Now I have to say that currently the game is probably the best it's ever been. Balancing wise, it's pretty strong at this point. Apart from one gear set, which is called Striker's Battle Gear, the game in itself is really balanced. PvE and PvP is pretty balanced at this point. And actually, as long as you go into PvP and you experiment and you have fun, as long as you play it, then actually it doesn't matter what gear someone else is running, you will enjoy yourself and you will compete. And I can vouch for that because I very rarely use Striker's Battle Gear, which is one of the highest, or probably the best gear set in the game. It's very rare that I use that particular gear set, and I still play very, very well. I do very, very well, and I enjoy myself. So I'd have to say that at this moment in time, the game is probably the best it's ever been. So it's definitely worth picking up right now. So you're interested in purchasing the game, but you're worried about the cost. Well, I have to say the game's been out for 2.5 years, so you can imagine that it won't cost a whole lot. On Steam, for the Gold Edition, which is what I'd recommend you purchasing it, because it has everything, it includes all the DLCs and all of that stuff, you will get the best experience out of purchasing the Gold Edition. You're looking at about £15. If you want it on console, you're looking anywhere from £15 to £20 for the Gold Edition, if you look around, from what I can tell. Now that's very, very cheap. The campaign itself is fairly long, levels 1 to 30, and then you've got a whole raft of activities within the game. You've got Last Stand, Skirmish PvP, which is really, really strong. You've got the Dark Zone, which is pretty much PvEVP. And then you've got other activities like you've got survival mode, which is like a battle royale mode but longer. It includes enemies as well. You can play against other people, but it will actually play against NPCs, and you have to like have a common goal. You have to get to the end of the dark zone. You have to extract some stuff from the dark zone. It's a very, very good experience. You've got resistance, another dedicated PvE mode. There's a whole lot of stuff, and that doesn't include incursions as well, which is kind of the main end game. So you've got a whole lot of stuff for a very little amount of money. So if you've got 15 quid, it's the best 15 quid you'll ever spend, I can promise you that. Lastly, and one of the most important points I have to make about why you should get the Division 1 is for the community. Now, the community, there are people that are toxic, that's the same for every community, but in general, the community is so helpful. If you go onto the Division Reddit page and you're a new person, all you got to do is say, look, you know, I'm a new person, I want some help, I'm at level 30, because level 30 is effectively when you completed the main mission, so you do that all on your own, basically. You can matchmake within the game, and I'll talk about that in the not-so-good points, but you can matchmake, that's absolutely fine, but ultimately, if you want the best experience, at least from my opinion, you just go through it solo, get to the end game, and then if you want help, just go onto Reddit and people will help you. I can promise you that. The community is very giving, from my experience, and they will happily help you in whatever activity you want. So that's one of the main reasons why you should get the Division 1 is for the community, because I've not experienced a community this loyal, this trustworthy, or at least this giving in any other game that I've played. Okay, so we've got all the good stuff out of the way, and you wanted to know what the bad stuff is. And I've got a couple of points to make here, which I think you lot need to be aware of. The first one, the learning curve. There is a learning curve in the game, but I think that's the same for almost every game, especially a game that's like this, 2.5 years old. If I was to go into Warframe, for example, I would have to sit there and analyse for days. There are other games, obviously, that don't really have a learning curve, but in general, games always have learning curves. This has one, as like most games. But I would have to say that the learning curve is a little bit steep. There's a lot of numbers involved, and ultimately, all you have to do is go onto Reddit and ask someone, and they'll tell you what the best gear is, what the best weapons are, what the best talents are, what, you know, what configurations work with what. But ultimately, it's just an experiment. So if you've got time to experiment with gear and weapons and all that sort of stuff, then you're going to love the game. So it is a no, because there is a learning curve, and some people don't like that. Some people just like to jump into a game and be there. But I think it's expected with any game that's this old, and it's this sort of game, a game that requires number crunching. So there you go. So I mentioned earlier that you'll be able to, at level 30, open up a cache. It will give you some gear, some high-end gear. It will give you some gear sets, which is a type of gear within the game, and it'll give you currency, and that way you can complete the shields, or at least get involved in those shield achievements. The only thing I'd have to say that with these caches, they don't give you classified gear sets, which is the highest tier of gear in the game, which is a problem if you want to go into the Dark Zone. Because in the Dark Zone, gear matters, and the level of your gear matters, really. I mean, ultimately in the Dark Zone, the best players can get away with not having classified gear, but most people, including myself, would not be able to get away with using that gear against people who have classified gear. And unfortunately, that's going to be a bit of a grind. Now, there are events coming up which allow you to actually get those classified gear pieces, but the likelihood is you're not going to get those straight away. Now, that does mean you can go into PvP within Skirmish and Last Stand. Within those game modes, all stats are normalized, meaning that you get the highest stats possible for those gears, but it does mean that you're not going to get the talents from the classified gear. So, unfortunately, you are going to be behind on gear, and that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, you're going to have to grind a bit. I think that's expected again. A lot like the learning curve, that is expected in a new game, that you'd have to grind a bit to actually get up there with the people that's been playing the game for a very long time. But you are going to be behind on gear, so if you don't have the time to grind for that new gear, then unfortunately you're just not going to have a good time. Last but not least is the struggle to matchmake. Now, I mentioned earlier that level 1 to 30, it is one of the best experiences I've ever had for a game. It's truly amazing. But obviously, when I played the game first, there was a lot of people playing it. I could matchmake if I wanted to, and it's nice to play in a group of people. Currently in the Division, there isn't a lot of people playing the game from levels 1 to 30 because most people are already at the end game. Now, there is a constant stream of new players from what I can tell, so I actually played level 1 to 30 most recently for a new character, and I would say out of 7 or 8 times that I matchmaked, probably twice did I get people. So you are going to struggle to matchmake, unfortunately, but every mission can be soloed, definitely. It just will take a little bit of tenacity, a little bit of replaying it if you've never played the game before. Fortunately for me, I've played it a lot, so I understand the game a lot. But if you're new, then it might take you, playing a few missions more than a couple of times. And I think that's a good thing. You don't want to just breeze through the game. You want it to be difficult in some places. You also want it to be easy in others. And I think that the game does that within the levels 1 to 30. But obviously the negative being, you are going to struggle to matchmake. If you don't mind that and you don't mind playing solo, then take it as a positive. I don't know. So there you are. Hopefully I've been as unbiased and neutral as possible. I will obviously scream that you should buy the game because it is one of my favourite games of all time, but I appreciate that it's not everyone's cup of tea. It is going to take a lot of grinding, although there are some ways to actually get up there as quickly as possible, and it is going to take a little bit of time to get to the people that are obviously at the end game like myself. But I think that's fair enough for a game that's 2.5 years old and you're coming in as a fresh new player. I think that would be expected from everyone, and I would not expect to go into a game day one, after a couple of hours and be with the people who are at end game. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. It does help. Subscribe if you are going to be purchasing this game and you want some Division content. Subscribe to me here and I will be covering as much Division as possible, as I've always done for the last couple of years, and I will be covering the Division 2 in as much detail as I possibly can. So there you go. Thanks for your time. Epic out.